Book 101 review. Book 101 is allowed the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's economist, economic policy expert, and of course the author of the book Why Socialism Struggles. No other than Dr. Doug Cardell. Welcome, Dr. Dog, on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Sure, I'm happy to be here, Daniel. My book is called, as you said, Why Socialism Struggles, Exposing the Economic Errors That Undermine Utopian Ideals. Um, I wrote this book because I think that this country and most of the world, including your country, are at an economics crossroads right now. Uh, there are a lot of people pushing really hard to adopt socialism, and we as the people have to make a decision about that. And I think, unfortunately, too many of the people in your country and my country and the rest of the world don't really understand what socialism is and what they're getting themselves into.
Mr. Dog or Dr. Dog, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you. So today, let's talk about your debut book. Your title posits that socialism struggles due to economic errors. Is it or is the core struggle fundamentally an economic one, or is it a class with immutable aspects of human nature and incentive?
Well, in a sense, it's both, Daniel. Economics really is human nature. Most people think economics is about money, but it isn't really. Economics is about efficiency. It's about how to use our resources the best way we can. And essentially, every living thing functions economically. For example, if you were to set a bale of hay 500 meters away and another bale of hay 100 meters away, and you let a cow loose, which one do you think, which bale of hay do you think the cow would go to?
Well, in
Well,
both
of course,
sides.
it would
Go
go to
ahead.
the closer one. Sure, it would go to the one 100 meters away because
Mhm.
at some level, now I don't know, cows don't do calorie calculations, but at some level, as a living thing, the cow understands that it uses calories to get to the hay. And if it uses up more calories to get to the hay than it gets from the hay, it's not going to live very long. So it's going to go to the nearest source of hay it can get to. Every living thing functions economically. And so the answer to your question is it's really both. It's about people, but it's about economics as well, because we're all economic beings.
Indeed, we are all economic being. You use the term utopian ideals. How do you define the utopian vision that socialism aims for, and what the point to these ideals become economically unworkable in your analysis?
Um, well, socialism, of course, comes from Karl Marx, and Karl Marx was incredibly naive, but he was also incredibly biased. Um, he didn't understand the world. The world he thought was going away was the world of uh, mercantilism, small shops, uh, the local shoemaker, the local uh, watchmaker, uh, and he thought that was the ideal world. So he wanted to create a system that would keep that world in place, that would keep things functioning at a very small level. And he thought that corporations, companies, were evil because they were the things that were causing progress. They were the things making things move beyond where we were. The problem with this thinking is, of course, that if you want to build cars or cell phones, if you want to have communication like you and I are having right now, that can't happen on a mom and pop basis. It takes big companies to make this happen. Your cell phone probably has the work of thousands of engineers, products, pieces of it that come from hundreds of countries. You can't do that on a mom and pop basis and make it work. Um, as far as my analysis of it, why it fails, the thing that I studied primarily was the real personal consumption expenditures. I tracked those over 20 years and found that the, the Federal Reserve was right about their forecasts 46% of the time. So they didn't do as well as flipping a coin would have done. That's one of the serious economic problems of socialism is you can't predict, you can't plan what you can't predict. And so in socialism, the idea is the country is trying to plan an economy. They hire an economist like me and say, okay, Dr. Cardell, you figure out how we're going to do everything, how many cars we should make, how many buses we should make, how many airplanes we should make, what kind should they be? So, for example, in Germany before World War II, Hitler took over Porsche and directed them to make the Volkswagen. And he said that's what people should have. Everybody should have a Volkswagen Beetle. Well, I've had a Volkswagen Beetle. I liked it, but the point is that they didn't give you a choice, and so it doesn't work out very well because everybody doesn't want the same kind of car. We're all individuals, and we make choices, and socialism takes that choice away. And eventually it ends up having to take freedom away because people don't like not having choice. So they complain. And we've seen that over and over again all over the world.
Yes, indeed. All over the world, many proponents argue that the true socialism has never been tried, only corrupted versions. How does your book address these common rebuttal? What specific economic mechanisms, even theory, lead to struggles you identify?
Well, socialism has been tried. In fact, socialism was the first thing that was tried in the United States. Um, both Jamestown and the Mayflower colony were founded on socialism, and it didn't work. In both cases, both colonies almost starved to death until they put in place reforms to turn it back toward capitalism and free markets. Because what tends to happen is when people have no incentive to work, they don't. And so what we think of as a safety net becomes a hammock. It's a thing that people stay in and never get out.
Hmm, interesting, Dr. Dog. Beyond the classic critique of center planning, what is a more subtle or modern economic error you expose that even well intentioned socialist frameworks consistently make?
Well, the biggest error is in the failure of the ability to plan. You'll remember that in most socialist countries, when Russia was socialist, they had 5 year plans. And that what they did was they hired somebody like me to plan the entire economy. And it can't be done. You've probably heard of chaos theory. And chaos theory was come across uh, when trying to figure out the weather. And it turns out that the economy is a lot like the weather. You may have heard the expression that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, it can trigger a hurricane in Texas. And what causes that is that every system has tipping points that occur from time to time. And so if a hurricane is starting to brew near Texas and all it needs is a tiny push, it might be something like a butterfly flapping its wings that gives it that extra little nudge. Well, the economy is very much like the weather. And Lorenz, the guy that came up with chaos theory, was able to show that the weather would never be predictable more than a couple of weeks in advance. And the same is true of the economy. In fact, you could draw a parallel and say that someone buying a pair of shoes in Peru could trigger a depression in Brazil.
Dr. Dog, let's talk about the calculation problem. How do socialist models, even decentralized ones, propose to solve the problem of irrationally allocating resources without the price signals of a free market?
Well, unlike unlike socialist countries where they try and plan the economy, which is like trying to predict the weather, it doesn't work. The free market capitalism relies on what's called spontaneous order. Spontaneous orders is a way that systems can self organize and end up working almost miraculously. Our bodies are a good example of spontaneous order. We tend to think that our bodies are under our control, but they're not. The cells in your liver don't know that they're cells in a liver. They don't know you exist. All they know is they're supposed to do stuff based on chemical signals they get from the rest of the liver. And they just do their job and go on about their business. They aren't aware of you at all. To a liver cell, you are just an environment. And so all of this happens in our bodies completely spontaneously. Your brain isn't planning what's going on. In fact, it couldn't possibly plan what's going on. It would if you had to address every cell in your body and tell it what to do, it would take thousands and thousands of years to do that because there's trillions of cells in your body. And if you tried to communicate with each one of them, it's a fool's errand. It can't be done. And so we have to rely on spontaneous order to keep us alive. And that's what we do.
Mr. Dog, your book likely address incentive. How does realization of capital and profit impact the engine of innovation and entrepreneurship that drives long-term economic growth?
Well, it's the sole thing that's responsible for long term economic growth. If you look, you can look at per capita GDP over millennia, and let's start. Let's say at zero. So in the year zero, we had X amount of per capita GDP. 1,000 years later, we had the same per capita GDP. 500 years after that, now we're in the year 1500, it had come up just a tiny bit. 1600, a tiny bit more. 1700, it starts actually coming up. Why? Because the United States was formed based on free market capitalism. By 1800, it was really taken off. And what was responsible for that was the growth of free market capitalism in the New World and leading the rest of the world with it. As a result, the entire world is now 14 times better off than they were before the creation of free market capitalism in the New World. And um, in the advanced countries, your country, my country, Western Europe, Japan, uh, we're more like 30, 35 times better off than we were back then. And that's all the result of using capital. What people don't understand about capital is what you have available to work with. So in my case, I lift weights, I run. That's being a capitalist. I'm investing what I have now, time to go running, time to lift weights, energy to do both for a better future. That's what capitalism is all about. The key factor, the key motivating force in capitalism is investing what we have now to make a better world in the future. And as we do that, we're creating value. We don't take value from anybody else, we create value. And that's what you and I are doing right now. Hopefully, we're creating value for all the listeners, and they'll come out of this better than they were before. And so we invested our time to make a better future for all your listeners. That's what capitalism is about.
A better future indeed. So, Dr. Doug, as economist and economic policy expert, as well as a debut author, what are your short term and long term goals?
Well, obviously, I hope that I can get the word out there, have enough people buy the book and read it to change people's minds and stop doing silly things like New York just did a week ago and elect a socialist. It just, it's amazing to me that people can shoot themselves in the foot like that. They're going to pay a big price for what they did Tuesday.
Well, good luck to your goals, Mr. Dog, and looking forward for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be an author and economist like you?
Well, I think the most important thing anyone can do is to stop thinking of what they're doing as working for a living, but instead think of what they're doing as creating value for a living. That's what we really have to do. You can work really hard. You could dig holes all day and fill them up again. You've worked like crazy, but you haven't provided any value. So what you've done is worthless. If everyone were to start thinking about creating value and how they can help their fellow man by creating value, the whole world would be so much better, and the people involved would be happier.
Dr. Dog, can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey? And thank you for that advice.
Uh, well, I would say almost anything by Thomas Sowell. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
if someone was looking for an economics book besides mine, I would say start with Economics 101 by Sowell. Or it might be Basic Economics by Sowell. I don't remember, but
Well,
the
thank you for
best
that
I can.
yes, thank you for that recommended book. Dr. Dog, and are there any example in history or in the modern world where you believe socialist economic principles have been applied with any measurable success, even if limited?
No, socialism has never succeeded because it's impossible. It's an oxymoron. Democratic socialism doesn't exist. Um, Socialism must evolve into dictatorship. It always has, and it always will.
Who did you write this book for? Was it for to persuade those who are sympathetic to socialism or to arm its critics with better arguments?
Well, in my time as an economist, I've gotten hundreds of questions. And I wrote this book in a question and answer format. Each chapter answers a basic question. And within that chapter, there's lots and lots of questions, most of them that I've actually been asked many, many times. And so I wanted to write this book in a way that can explain economics the problems of socialism and the benefits of capitalism in a way that, well, one of the reviewers of the book on Goodreads said it makes the conclusion seem obvious.
Dr. Dog, in an age of rising wealth and inequality and concern about climate change, many young people are drawn to socialist ideas. What is the single most important point you want to this generation to understand from your economic analysis?
Well, true capitalism tends to reduce economic inequality, and socialism increases economic inequality. If you look at, for example, North Korea, the people, the general population, are some of the poorest in the world. The socialist elite are some of the richest. The wealth inequality in North Korea is far beyond that in the United States. The other problem is that people, when they talk about wealth inequality, don't understand the basic principles. In capitalism, well, let me back up a second. Excuse me. In in the past, say 1500, the only way you could ever get anything from anybody, get ahead, say it, was by taking from somebody else, because the amount of wealth that existed in the world at that time was fixed. There was only so much. So if you got more, it meant somebody else got less. Capitalism doesn't work that way. The way capitalism works is you make a bigger pie. That is, you increase the total amount of wealth. Now, yes, some people end up with more, but everybody ends up with more. As I said, we're 30 times better off. The average person in the United States or in Canada is 30 times better off than they were in 1500. Now, yes, we have people that are multi-billionaires. So what? What do you care if someone is really, really rich if they made enough money for all the rest of us to share? And that's exactly what happens. You look at something like Amazon. Yeah, Bezos got rich. Sure, he did. But look at how much richer we've all gotten because of it. Amazon has been a huge boon. Look at Microsoft. I'm not, I don't know about you, but I'm running Microsoft on the computer I'm talking to you on. And uh, Bill Gates made all of us better off. He became a billionaire as a result. So what? We're all better off because of it. Would we be willing to go back to trade and say, we're going to go back to not having computers so that we can make Bill Gates poor? That's a silly argument.
Dr. Dog, what would you say to someone who agrees with your economic critics but feels that capitalism in its current form is also failing in profound ways that make socialist alternatives seem necessary?
Well, much of the things that capitalism gets blamed for are actually problems of government. One of the examples I use in my book is if someone is breaking into your house and you call the police, you would expect the police to come and help you. But sometimes what government does is they send the police and the police help the burglar. How does that work? Well, I live in the state of Arizona. And in Arizona, we have what's called the open range laws. What that means is that if, and I have some acreage here on the place I live at, and I've spent thousands of dollars fencing out cattle. Because in Arizona, if the cattle come and crash through your patio door, you're responsible. If you hurt the cattle in the process, you have to pay for the cattle. In fact, if you're driving down the highway and you hit a cow in Arizona and you die, your heirs will have to pay for the cow you ran over. That's an example of what's called crony capitalism. It's the government using its power to help certain people. Are the capitalists that wanted that to happen Uh, Bad actors? Yeah, I would say so. But the government is worse. They're supposed to be protecting us from that. But instead, they help the bad actors. And so they pass laws saying you can't hurt the cows, but the cows can hurt you. So most of the things that we think of as being problems in capitalism, and actually there's two whole chapters in my book devoted to that, um, are really problems of government. So, for example, the recent healthcare debate that I think got through the Senate uh, last night, um, healthcare was made a problem by the government because the government took actions by giving tax breaks and so on um, to insurance companies to remove the consumer from the process. I'm not sure how it works in Canada, but here in the US, you can't shop for medical care. You can't even find out how much it costs. When I go to the doctor, I don't know how much I'm paying. The insurance company pays it. When that happens, costs go up. And so medical practitioners have made a fortune, but the people have suffered. My grandfather was a medical doctor. He lived in a normal 3 or 4 bedroom house, drove a 5-year-old car, as I remember. Uh, he was by no means rich. Uh, but nowadays, most doctors make several hundred thousand a year. And that's been caused by eliminating capitalism, eliminating the ability of the consumer to shop.
Mr. Doug, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in third season, my food 101 in fifth season too, geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, and music 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101, Mental Health 101, and Bible Verses 101, Science 101, and Sex 101. And it's second season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Dr. Dog, having exposed what you see in the fundamental errors, what is more viable path forward for achieving a more just, equitable, and prosperous society that learns from failures of both pure socialism and unbridled capitalism?
Well, the most important thing is to do as much as we can to keep government from tinkering with the economy. They can't do it well. It's impossible. That's what my research has proven is that nobody can predict what's going to happen when you start messing with the economy. And it almost always turns out badly.
Mr. or Dr. Doug Cardell, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your debut or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
I just hope people will go out there and buy the book and learn about it and tell their friends what works and what doesn't. And it's been a pleasure talking with you, Daniel.
Likewise, Dr. Dog. Thank you. And please create more books because the world need it. Yes, people, let's support Mr. Dog Cartel or Dr. Dog Cartel because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering book like this to come. So, Dr. Dog, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Modicam people, see you soon.